Commander Sarah Chen pressed her face against the reinforced viewport of the orbital defense station, watching the massive alien fleet approach Earth. The Zephyrian armada stretched across space like a metallic plague, their ships gleaming with an otherworldly luminescence that made her stomach churn. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. "How many?" she asked without turning around. Lieutenant Rodriguez checked his scanner for the 100th time in the past hour. 12 dreadnoughts, ma'am. 47 cruisers. Over 300 smaller craft. Intel estimates each dreadnought carries enough firepower to glass a continent. Sarah finally turned from the viewport, her weathered face showing no emotion despite the impossible odds. At 42, she had seen 3 interstellar wars, survived the siege of Mars, and led the evacuation of the Titan colonies. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. The Zephyrians weren't here to conquer. They were here to exterminate. The communication array crackled to life, filling the command center with an alien voice that sounded like grinding metal mixed with whale song. The translation matrix worked overtime to convert the sounds into something resembling human language. Primitive carbon-based entities of the third planet, the voice boomed throughout the station. Your species has been marked for immediate termination. You have 37 of your time units to prepare your souls for departure from this existence. The Galactic Purification Protocol demands your removal. Sarah grabbed the communication microphone, her knuckles white with tension. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. By what authority do you threaten our world? A sound that might have been laughter echoed through the speakers. Authority? We are the Zephyrian Empire, destroyers of 17 civilizations, masters of technologies beyond your comprehension. Your species committed the ultimate transgression by venturing beyond your solar system without permission from the Galactic Council. The penalty is extinction. We never received any communication from this council, Sarah replied, buying time while her tactical officers ran combat simulations on their screens. Every scenario showed the same result: complete human defeat within 6 hours. Ignorance is not absolution, carbon being. Behold our mercy. We grant you time to make peace with your primitive gods. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in deadly silence. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. Earth's most advanced weapons were toys compared to Zephyrian technology. Their energy shields could deflect nuclear weapons like raindrops. Their particle beams could slice through Earth's most advanced armor like tissue paper. But Sarah Chen hadn't survived 3 wars by accepting impossible odds. Rodriguez, get me Admiral Harrison at Terra Command. Patterson, I want every available ship in this system, military and civilian. Won, start evacuation protocols for all orbital facilities. She paused, studying the tactical display showing the approaching fleet. And, someone get me our best xenobiologist. Ma'am? Lieutenant Patterson looked confused. A scientist? Now. The Zephyrians have been in space for thousands of years, Sarah explained, her mind racing through possibilities. They've conquered 17 civilizations, which means they know how to fight 17 different types of enemies. But they've never fought humans before. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived at the command center 20 minutes later, his usually neat appearance disheveled from the emergency summons. The xenobiologist had spent the past 5 years studying Zephyrian physiology from captured probe data and intercepted communications. Doctor, Sarah said without preamble, tell me about their weaknesses. Webb adjusted his glasses nervously. Commander, the Zephyrians are silicon-based lifeforms with exoskeletons that can withstand temperatures of over 2,000 degrees Celsius. Their atmospheric requirements are completely different from ours. They breathe a methane-nitrogen mixture and find oxygen highly toxic. What about their psychology? They're hive-minded to some extent, but with individual consciousness. They value efficiency above all else and have never encountered a species that could surprise them tactically. Every civilization they've conquered fell within standard predicted parameters. Sarah nodded slowly. What's their standard conquest protocol? They bombard planetary defenses from extreme range, then land ground forces to eliminate survivors. They prefer overwhelming firepower over prolonged engagement. Quick, clean, efficient. The tactical display chimed softly, showing the Zephyrian fleet had reached the outer edge of Earth's solar system. Their formation was perfect, their advance unstoppable. According to every military doctrine Sarah had ever studied, the proper response was immediate surrender. Instead, she smiled for the first time since the aliens had arrived. Patterson, send a message to all human ships in the system. Tell them to form up in the asteroid belt. Wong, I want those evacuation transports to head for Mars, but take the long route through the asteroid field. Make it look like we're trying to hide them. Ma'am, Rodriguez interrupted, the asteroids won't provide any real cover against their sensors. I'm not trying to hide from their sensors, Lieutenant. I'm trying to get them to underestimate us. Sarah turned back to the viewport, watching the distant stars that now concealed humanity's executioners. Dr. Webb, you said they value efficiency. That means they'll want to end this quickly with minimal resource expenditure. They're expecting us to behave like every other species they've conquered. But, we're going to behave differently? Webb asked. We're going to behave like humans. The next 8 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah had every available human ship in the system converge on her position, creating what appeared to be a desperate last stand near Earth's largest orbital platform. 347 vessels of various sizes, from massive dreadnoughts to tiny mining craft, formed a defensive perimeter that looked impressive until compared to the approaching Zephyrian armada. The alien fleet maintained its steady advance, showing no signs of concern about the human formation. Why should they? Their smallest cruiser outgunned Earth's most powerful battleship. When the Zephyrians reached optimal firing range, they deployed in a standard battle formation that Webb recognized from their conquest of the Altarian Republic 40 years earlier. Textbook efficiency. Incoming transmission from the lead Zephyrian vessel, Rodriguez announced. The alien voice filled the command center once again, though this time it carried an undertone of amusement. Carbon beings, your defensive posture is adequate for primitive entities. We acknowledge your courage in the face of inevitable extinction. As a gesture of respect, we will make your deaths swift. Sarah opened the channel. Zephyrian Commander, I am offering you one final chance to withdraw from this system. Leave now, and no harm will come to your fleet. The alien laughter that followed was like the sound of breaking glass. Remarkable. Even facing annihilation, your species maintains its capacity for self-delusion. Very well, carbon being. Witness the power that has conquered galaxies. The Zephyrian dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, 12 beams of concentrated energy that could have melted mountains. The beams struck the human defensive line with devastating effect, vaporizing 6 ships instantly and crippling a dozen more. But Sarah was smiling as the return fire began. Because the Zephyrians had made their first mistake. They had fought like Zephyrians, efficient and predictable. They had targeted the largest ships first, following standard military doctrine that had worked against 17 previous civilizations. They had never fought an enemy that didn't care about losing ships. As the human vessels returned fire with weapons that barely scratched Zephyrian shields, Sarah activated the real plan. Hidden among the destroyed and damaged ships, camouflaged life pods began ejecting into space, each one containing a single human in a modified EVA suit. The Zephyrians, focused on the main fleet engagement, didn't notice 3,000 individual humans drifting through the battle zone like debris. Phase 2, Doctor, Sarah said quietly as another human cruiser exploded under alien fire. Tell me again about their atmospheric requirements. Marine Sergeant Jake Morrison drifted through space inside his modified EVA suit, watching the massive Zephyrian dreadnought grow larger in his helmet display. Around him, invisible against the cosmic backdrop, 3,000 other humans floated toward their targets like seeds on a stellar wind. The plan was insane. It violated every principle of space warfare ever developed. But, as Jake watched another human destroyer die under alien fire, he remembered Commander Chen's words during the briefing: they've conquered 17 civilizations by following the same playbook. Today, we throw that playbook out the airlock. Jake's suit was no ordinary EVA gear. Human engineers had worked around the clock to create something unprecedented, a stealth infiltration system designed specifically for boarding alien vessels. The suit's surface was covered in adaptive camouflage that mimicked cosmic background radiation. Its life support system could keep a human alive for 6 hours in the vacuum of space. Most importantly, it was equipped with a revolutionary new weapon system that the Zephyrians would never see coming. "Bravo team, this is Morrison," Jake whispered into his comm unit. "Target designated Zulu 7 coming into range. Beginning approach vector." The Zephyrian dreadnought stretched across his vision like a metallic mountain. Its hull gleamed with exotic metals that could withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. Energy fields shimmered around its surface, deflecting every human projectile and beam weapon. The ship was a fortress, seemingly impregnable. But Jake Morrison had spent 2 years studying Zephyrian ship designs captured from probe data. He knew something the aliens didn't know that he knew. Every Zephyrian vessel had external maintenance hatches designed for their silicon-based repair drones. The hatches were small, barely large enough for human use, and they were never locked because no enemy had ever gotten close enough to use them. "Movement on the hull," came a voice through his comm. "Looks like their repair drones are responding to battle damage." Jake smiled grimly inside his helmet. The Zephyrian drones were twice the size of humans, with multiple mechanical arms and built-in tools for hull repair. They moved across the ship's surface like metallic spiders, fixing damage from human weapons that had somehow managed to scratch their armor. "Wait for my signal," Jake commanded his team. "Remember, one chance only." The dreadnought's main guns fired again, sending beams of destruction toward the human fleet. Jake felt a moment of sadness as another Earth vessel died, but he forced himself to focus on the mission. Every human death bought more time for his people to reach their targets. His suit's proximity alarm chimed softly as he reached the optimal distance. Below him, a Zephyrian repair drone worked on a section of hull damaged by a lucky human missile strike. The drone was focused entirely on its task, its sensors calibrated to detect hull breaches and structural weaknesses, not small objects drifting in space. Jake activated his suit's magnetic clamps and began his approach. The drone's sensor array swept past him 3 times without registering his presence. The adaptive camouflage was working perfectly, making his heat signature indistinguishable from cosmic background radiation. 20 meters. 10 meters. 5 meters. The repair drone finally detected something unusual, but by then, it was too late. Jake's boots touched the hull with a soft magnetic clang, and his suit's secondary systems immediately began analyzing the Zephyrian ship structure. The alien vessel was even more impressive up close. Its hull material was some kind of crystalline metal that seemed to absorb and redistribute energy from weapons impacts. "Contact," Jake whispered into his comm. "Beginning infiltration." He pulled out his primary weapon, a simple human crowbar. The Zephyrian repair drone rotated toward him, its optical sensors trying to process what it was seeing. The drone's programming had never encountered anything like a human being. Its threat assessment algorithms couldn't classify Jake as dangerous, because no organic creature had ever attempted to board a Zephyrian warship. Jake used the moment of confusion to pry open the nearest maintenance hatch. The alien metal was incredibly strong, but the hatch mechanism was designed for routine access, not security. It opened with surprising ease, revealing a narrow tube that led into the ship's interior. The repair drone finally decided that Jake represented some kind of anomaly that should be reported. It began transmitting an alert signal just as Jake grabbed one of its manipulator arms and yanked himself into the maintenance shaft. Inside the Zephyrian ship, Jake found himself in an environment unlike anything humans had ever imagined. The corridors were filled with a thick, methane-heavy atmosphere that would have killed him instantly without his suit's life support. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie blue-green glow, and the walls were covered in a crystalline substance that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Inside the target, Jake reported. "Atmosphere is toxic as expected." Proceeding to primary objective. His mission was simple in concept, impossible in execution. Every Zephyrian ship was powered by a central reactor that converted matter directly into energy. The reactors were shielded by multiple layers of exotic materials and protected by automated defense systems. No known weapon could breach them from the outside. But Jake wasn't carrying a conventional weapon. He made his way through the ship's service tunnels, following the schematics his suit's computer had downloaded from captured Zephyrian data. The tunnels were barely large enough for human use, designed for maintenance drones much smaller than their repair cousins. The aliens had never considered that an enemy might infiltrate their ships through the maintenance system. As Jake crawled through the narrow passages, he could hear the ship's weapons firing above him. The vibrations traveled through the hull like thunder, reminding him that his fellow humans were dying while he played hide-and-seek in alien corridors. Approaching reactor level, he whispered into his calm Zulu 7 reactor complex in sight. Through a transparent section of tunnel, Jake could see into the ship's power core chamber. The Zephyrian reactor was a thing of terrible beauty, a sphere of pure energy contained within layers of crystalline shielding. Alien technicians moved around it like priests tending a mechanical god, their silicon-based forms glinting in the reactor's light. Jake counted 6 technicians and 2 Guardian units. The Guardians were the Zephyrian equivalent of security guards, heavily armored drones with built-in weapon systems. Their sensors swept the chamber constantly, watching for threats that might endanger the reactor. But they were watching for Zephyrian-sized threats. Energy weapons. Explosive devices. Sabotage drones. They weren't watching for a single human with a crowbar and a suicide vest. Jake opened his suit's final equipment compartment and pulled out humanity's secret weapon against the Zephyrian Empire. It wasn't a gun or a bomb or some exotic piece of technology. It was a simple glass vial containing 3 liters of ordinary Earth seawater. Dr. Webb's research had identified the critical weakness in Zephyrian technology. Their ship's atmospheres were completely incompatible with water-based chemistry. A single drop of H2O in their methane-nitrogen environment would trigger a catastrophic chemical reaction that would spread through the entire vessel's life support system. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 civilizations, but they had never fought an enemy whose most abundant natural resource was their greatest weakness. Jake attached the vial to a small explosive charge and set the timer for 60 seconds. Enough time to get clear of the reactor chamber, not enough time for the aliens to detect and neutralize the device. As he placed the charge against the tunnel wall adjacent to the reactor core, Jake thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 7 years old and wanted to be an astronaut. If this plan worked, she might actually get that chance. Zulu 7 package delivered, he whispered into his calm. 60 seconds and counting. The timer display in his helmet began its countdown, 59, 58, 57. All around the Zephyrian fleet, 3,000 humans were delivering identical packages to alien ships. Some had been detected and killed by security systems. Others had gotten lost in the maze-like interiors of alien vessels. But more than 2,000 had reached their targets. In 47 seconds, the Zephyrian Empire was going to learn that sometimes the most primitive weapon is the most effective. As Jake crawled back through the maintenance tunnels as fast as his magnetic boots would carry him, he could hear alarms beginning to sound throughout the alien ship. The Zephyrians had finally realized they had been boarded. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. Jake Morrison smiled as he reached the hull breach where he had entered the ship. Through his comm unit, he could hear similar countdowns from hundreds of other human infiltrators throughout the alien fleet. 5 seconds. 4. 3. 2. 1. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Zephyrian flagship. Admiral Kethvar had been monitoring the battle from his command sphere, watching with satisfaction as human vessels exploded under his fleet's superior firepower, when his atmospheric processors began screaming alerts. "What is happening?" the Admiral demanded, his voice creating harmonic frequencies that rattled the crystalline walls of the command center. Chief Technician Mordun's exoskeleton shifted nervously as he studied his displays. "Admiral, we are detecting massive atmospheric contamination throughout the fleet. The contamination appears to be spreading through our life support systems at an unprecedented rate." Admiral Kethvar's primary optical array focused on the readouts with growing alarm. In his 300 years of military service, he had never seen anything like it. The contamination signature was unlike any known weapon or biological agent. It seemed to be simple hydrogen-oxygen compounds, but the effect on Zephyrian ship systems was catastrophic. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our ships are sealed against all known toxins. Our atmospheric recycling systems can neutralize any chemical weapon." That was when the first reports began coming in from the invaded vessels. "Admiral." The communication officer's voice carried harmonics of panic. "The dreadnought Inevitable Death is reporting total life support failure. They have alien contamination throughout their methane circulation network. 20% of the crew is already dead." Before the Admiral could respond, more reports flooded in. The cruiser Stellar Annihilation was venting atmosphere through hull breaches. The destroyer Perfect Victory was drifting powerless after its reactor core suffered a catastrophic failure. Ship after ship reported the same impossible scenario: total system collapse triggered by an unknown contaminant. "Admiral," Mordun's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm detecting the same contamination signature here, on our flagship. It's in our secondary atmospheric processing unit." Admiral Kefvar felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquests: fear. Not the fear of death, which all warriors understood, but the fear of the impossible. The fear that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. "Seal all atmospheric systems," he commanded. "Emergency isolation protocols. Find the source of this contamination and eliminate it." But it was too late. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, simple seawater was reacting with alien atmospheres in ways that defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about chemistry. The water didn't just contaminate their air supplies, it triggered cascading failures in every system that depended on their methane-nitrogen atmosphere. Reactors began shutting down as their cooling systems failed. Weapons arrays lost power as their energy conduits corroded. Life support systems collapsed as the alien water molecules bonded with methane compounds to create toxic sludge that clogged filters and poisoned breathing apparatus. From his position drifting in space, Sergeant Morrison watched the impossible sight of a Zephyrian dreadnought dying from the inside out. Emergency lights flickered across its hull as internal explosions sent shockwaves through the massive vessel. Escape pods began ejecting from the ship like sparks from a dying fire. "All units, this is Morrison," he broadcasted to his scattered team. "Primary objective achieved. Zulu 7 is going down. Repeat, the big bastard is going down." Similar reports echoed through space as human infiltrators reported successful missions throughout the alien fleet. Of the 12 Zephyrian dreadnoughts, 10 were suffering critical failures. 23 cruisers were either dead in space or venting atmosphere. Hundreds of smaller vessels were drifting powerless. But the battle wasn't over. 5 Zephyrian ships had managed to seal their contaminated sections before the seawater could spread throughout their entire systems. These vessels, though damaged, were still capable of fighting. And they were very, very angry. Commander Sarah Chen watched the tactical display from her command center, hardly believing what she was seeing. The plan had worked better than anyone had dared hope, but the surviving Zephyrian ships were now focusing all their firepower on the remaining human vessels with unprecedented fury. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, "the surviving enemy vessels are breaking formation. They're targeting our ships with concentrated fire. We're losing vessels faster than before." Sarah nodded grimly. The Zephyrians had finally realized they were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Their methodical, efficient approach to warfare had been replaced by desperate fury. "They're scared," Dr. Webb observed from his position at the science station. "For the first time in their species' history, they've encountered something they don't understand. They're reacting emotionally instead of logically." Sarah smiled. "Then, we've already won." She opened a communication channel to the surviving Zephyrian ships. "Admiral Kefvar of the Zephyrian Empire, this is Commander Chen. I believe we need to talk." The response came immediately, filled with harmonics that the translation system struggled to interpret as anything other than rage. "What have you done to my fleet, human?" What weapon did you use against us? Water, Sarah replied simply. Just water. The silence that followed lasted for nearly 30 seconds. When Admiral Kefvar finally responded, his voice carried undertones that suggested profound disbelief. Impossible. Water is a simple compound. It cannot defeat Zephyrian technology. You've spent thousands of years perfecting weapons designed to fight silicon-based lifeforms with methane-nitrogen atmospheres, Sarah explained. You've never had to defend against an enemy whose entire planet is covered in something that's toxic to your basic life support systems. Another long pause. You are claiming that your primitive H2O compound destroyed my dreadnoughts? Your ships are marvels of engineering, Admiral. They can withstand nuclear weapons, energy bombardment, even direct asteroid impacts. But, you never considered that your greatest enemy might be something as simple as the substance that covers 70% of our planet's surface. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the surviving Zephyrian vessels maintaining their distance from the human fleet. Their formation was defensive now, no longer the confident attack pattern they had displayed at the beginning of the battle. Impossible, Admiral Kefvar repeated, but his voice carried less certainty than before. No species has ever defeated Zephyrian technology with such primitive methods. Admiral, Sarah said gently, you've conquered 17 civilizations, but they were all similar to yours. Silicon-based, methane-breathing, living on worlds without liquid water. You've never fought carbon-based lifeforms from a water world before. Dr. Webb stepped forward and gestured for the communication microphone. Sarah handed it to him with a questioning look. Admiral Kefvar, the scientist said, I've studied your species for 5 years. Your technology is remarkable, far beyond anything we can create. But, your entire technological base assumes that water is rare and methane is common. You've built an empire around that assumption. Unfortunately for you, that assumption doesn't hold true for Earth. The tactical display showed the Zephyrian ships beginning to withdraw toward the edge of the solar system. Their retreat was orderly, professional, but it was still a retreat. This battle is concluded, Admiral Kefvar announced finally. But this war is not over, humans. We will return with ships designed to counter your water-based weapons. Sarah took the microphone back. Admiral, before you leave, I want you to understand something important. We didn't defeat you with superior technology or better weapons. We defeated you because you underestimated us. You assumed we would fight like every other species you've conquered. And, what lesson am I supposed to learn from this humiliation? That humans are different, Sarah replied. We don't just adapt our tactics to fight our enemies. We adapt our enemies' weaknesses to fight with our strengths. Your ships weren't designed to handle water because water was never part of your military equation. But, for us, it's everywhere. It's what we're made of. The communication channel fell silent for several minutes. When Admiral Kefvar spoke again, his voice carried a new undertone that the translation system identified as something approaching respect. Your species is unusual, he admitted. We will need to reassess our approaches to carbon-based civilizations. Admiral, Sarah said, or you could consider a different approach entirely. Instead of trying to conquer us, maybe you should try to understand us. The galaxy is big enough for both silicon-based and carbon-based lifeforms. Another long pause. This possibility has never been considered by the Galactic Council. Then, maybe it's time to consider it. As the surviving Zephyrian ships disappeared into hyperspace, Commander Sarah Chen stood in her command center and watched Earth rotate peacefully below. Around her, the surviving human ships began the long process of rescue and recovery operations. Commander, Lieutenant Rodriguez said quietly, do you think they'll be back? Sarah smiled, remembering the words of an ancient human philosopher, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Oh, they'll be back, Rodriguez. But, next time, they won't underestimate human flesh. In the distance, Earth continued its ancient rotation, its blue oceans glinting in the sunlight like the ultimate weapon they had proven to be. And, throughout the galaxy, word began to spread about the carbon-based species that had defeated the mighty Zephyrian Empire not with superior technology, but with the simple substance that covered most of their world. Water. The universe's most abundant compound, and humanity's secret weapon against an empire that had never learned to fear something so beautifully, lethally simple.